Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Subas page 100, which discusses when it comes to a Jewish court and they are in the process of assessing and evaluating property, and they end up having it sold based on that evaluation or assessment. It has to be, according to at least one opinion, that they cannot make a major mistake in that evaluation. If the mistake was more than a sixth, namely that they ended up having the land which was really much more valuable, but it was undervalued by them by a sixth. So we say, according to one opinion, that transaction is null and void. There is another opinion that says it's still good. They could still consider it to be a valid transaction, because otherwise we're concerned of the perception of courts. If we start saying, oh, this court made a mistake, this court made a mistake, then people may not show respect to the judicial system when it comes to criminal cases or when it comes to civil law. However, according to, as we said, one opinion, at least they have to have some element of care, that they cannot make a major mistake. Now, because of that, it's also discussed whether or not hachraza, an announcement, needs to be made, that they have to publicly declare that they are in this process of assisting the sale of this land and the evaluation of this land. Now, it mentions in a city called Narda, the famous city of Narda, they would never do this announcement. And one of the reasons is quite fascinating. It says, because why is this land being sold? Perhaps it's because the person is in desperate need of money, or they cannot afford to keep this land anymore. And therefore, once it becomes publicly known that this is being sold and you're the one that bought it, it actually makes you look bad. Why? I didn't do anything illegal or unethical. But the reality is, there is an element of humiliation and embarrassment, that people are going to look at you and say, oh, you're the person that is the opportunist that waits until you find a piece of property in which is being sold because, unfortunately, a poor person desperately needed the money. And therefore, you probably were able to buy the land even lower than its true value because of this desperation that this person has. And therefore, the people in Nardo would not want this to be announced, because, first of all, it would deter anyone to want to even purchase this land, because they'll end up giving them a very bad name. And again, in general, by making these types of announcements, it's going to be something in which, when a person does make that purchase, it's going to cause people to speak negatively about that individual, which is quite fascinating, because you constantly are hearing about situations in which tragically a family is not able to pay their mortgage anymore, and therefore the bank has no choice but to say that they're going to take away their home, that there's a foreclosure on the property. And often we'll hear about these public announcements that there is this house that it was foreclosed, why don't you go and buy it? So there's this same element. Imagine that you're the one that did that, and here you are now living in this house. Now, me being that next door neighbor, I knew my neighbor before, who unfortunately, for whatever reason, was down and out, and he didn't have the ability to pay his bills, and therefore his house was foreclosed. And now I see you, the person who turned around and bought the house at a much cheaper price because it was foreclosed. And that is a negative feeling that that person could have. And therefore, because of that, at least in Narda, and perhaps maybe would be adopted in other places, in order to alleviate the potential humiliation and embarrassment of that person who would buy this property, it would not be so clearly announced that he was doing so in this situation.